Hello, and welcome to Mapping the College Audition. I'm your host, Charlie Murphy, director of MTCA. That's Musical Theater College Auditions. Check us out at mtca.com. And today we have got Isaac Powell on the show. For our newer listeners, these artist episodes are ones where we try to explore the paths to success that artists have forged and maybe are still forging in Isaac's case, and tease out how their theatrical training helped them to blaze that trail. It was a really fun conversation with Isaac. I had a million takeaways at the end, as you'll see, which is always a good sign for an interview being interesting. And yes, we did play a game at the end of it. I had a few passionate listeners reach out and tell me how much they love the games after Dan Amboyer's episode. Dan, was also disappointed in the lack of a game, he told me. So we brought it out of retirement for one episode. We'll see. You can tell me your honest opinions of whether you are pro or anti-game at mailbag@mappingthecollegeaudition.com. That's mailbag@mappingthecollegeaudition.com. Also a good place for feedback in general, guest requests, questions you'd want to have addressed on the show, or whatever you can think of that you would like to email to us. And another place you can ask me questions if you want to do so in a live format would be at our upcoming Meet MTCA workshop, which is tonight as this episode drops. So for any juniors, sophomores, freshmen, even rising freshmen, come check us out. That's tonight, May 7th at 8 p.m. Eastern. We'll be there talking you through the expectations of this crazy process, showing you examples of some of the work our coaches do with our students, and then helping you set up a roadmap for what your process might entail. You get to meet me in live human person, at least sort of digital live person. And all of those details are available at mtca.com. You can click the little banner at the top and sign up for free. And for our seniors, now officially our MTCA alumni after our big final decision day on May 1st, a huge congrats to all of you. I know there will still be waitlist movement in the coming weeks, and not all of you are completely done, but I'll just say in general, it was so fun to get to celebrate you all on May 1st and continue celebrating you this week. We had some really cool results this year with our students, including a fun thing like 10 of our students getting into Carnegie Mellon Drama, go Tartans, and just great results across the board. So you can check out some of those stats on our website, also see where all of our students chose to make their final decisions, which is always fun. It's exciting to see like the diverse array of paths that our students choose. To see many of them found a great fit that's going to work best for them on whatever that journey is going to look like. You will see a lot of most competitive BFA schools. You'll also see plenty of people who chose a BA route, even if maybe they had some really competitive BFA acceptances, or maybe chose a school that might not have the biggest name over some big name schools because it was the right fit for that student, whether that's artistically a right fit or a financially right fit. We support all of that for our students, and we love getting to celebrate wherever your careers might take you. And for our MTCA seniors, don't forget our very last webinar for you is this Thursday at 9 p.m. Eastern. We're excited to celebrate you all together a bit and talk about what's next in your transition into college and professional life. All right. That's a lot of intro. It was also a very exciting week in the Murphy household as well. A little fun MTCA moment happened. My wife has been working on a new musical here in New York City with another MTCA coach in the cast, the fabulous John Michael Reese, also a Carnegie Mellon classmate of mine. And then she had to leave the show this week, a week early, to shoot a big movie, which I'm not allowed to share any details with you, unfortunately. But then even cuter, she ended up being replaced in the show by an MTCA coach, the great Betsy Morgan, out of pure coincidence. Of course, I had nothing to do with this replacement. So she and I are going to attend the closing night of this show, and I'm going to get to watch Betsy do her thing, which I'm really excited about. It's a small world out there in this industry, right? At times it feels so vast, and at times it feels like you can put it in your pocket. But all right, no further ado allowed. Let's get into this interview with the great Isaac Powell. Well, we are so excited to be joined by Isaac Powell. Isaac has a BFA from the University of North Carolina School of the Arts, UNCSA, in acting. He's been on Broadway in Once on This Island, the revival, West Side Story, revival, only revivals on Broadway for Isaac so far. And most recently, maybe breaking that streak, is the Florence Welch Gadsby at ART, where he played Jay Gatsby. We'll definitely talk about that. You may know him from TV and film from stuff like The Franchise on HBO Max, the Dear Evan Hansen movie, American Horror Story, The Indoor Boys. I loved his episode of Modern Love, and there's lots more on there. You also, I don't know, these days may know him as a model. We'll talk about that. So who knows? Who knows what's going to come up in the interview? Isaac, how are you doing today? Welcome on the pod.
I'm good. Thank you. I'm good. Thanks for having me.
Were you as uncomfortable by that bio as you looked?
Could you
There's a lot
see
of
me
space.
cringing?
A lot of cringing. It's uncomfortable.
So much cringing.
Yeah, it's tough. This is something, speaking of TPAP, Isaac also was a TPAP person, so we share the connection. Alejandro and I used to teach a class in advocacy where like we would make each other like introduce each other and just pour praise on it and feel like, what does it feel like to have an advocate who really loves you and pushes you forward? So I'm being that for you in this
Wow.
moment.
Thank you. I need
Yeah.
it.
Okay, before we get deep into your fantastic career, can we go back a little bit? And I'm going to start you with a question I ask all the people on the pod as we begin is if you can kind of go back to yourself at 16, 17, starting to look at the college experience. And maybe if you wanted to, because I know you went to UNCCA high school too, you could start a little earlier. Basically, when you started thinking, here's how I envision training at the collegiate level happening for me. What was that vision for you? What did you anticipate it looking like? And then we'll get into what the experience was. But what were you thinking about as you thought about looking at colleges at first?
Yeah, I mean, it probably wasn't until I was 16, 17 years old. I did go to the Performing Arts Project in Company One. So this must have been, oh man, I don't know, 2013? No,
Yeah.
earlier than that, 2012, 2013. And I had never thought anything about doing a BFA or going to conservatory. I had no idea how you went from just being like a student actor to having a career.
Yeah.
And so when I went to TPAP that summer, that was when I learned about BFA programs and actually learned from industry professionals and could kind of see the thread finally of, okay, there's a kind of pipeline here. You go to a conservatory or a liberal arts program, 4 years, train, and then sort of enter the industry that way. So yeah, I guess when I was that age, I thought, okay, well, it's time to get serious about figuring out how to get into a BFA program, and started researching, what kind of program am I looking for? And
Did you have a full list at the time? Did you look for, like, were you like, I'm going to UNCSA and then I'm going to end up going there for college? Or did you do a full tour of schools of other auditions?
I didn't do any of those. I didn't do like a big college tour. I really was exposed to a few programs through TPAP because there were
Hmm.
some programs that would come and do master classes there. And then following that summer, I went into the UNCSA high school program, and they really focused your senior year on learning about these BFA programs
Hmm.
and giving you preparation, helping you, pick your materials and helping you apply and all of that. So that was really invaluable for me. But I didn't really know a whole lot about like BFA culture or anything like that at the time. So I had like a few schools that I knew of just from TPAP.
Hmm.
And from living in North Carolina, I knew that we had Elon 15 minutes away from where I grew up, and we
Hmm.
had UNCSA. And then, of course, I knew about some of the bigger programs as well. Like, I think at that time, like CCM was on my mind, and Carnegie Mellon and University of Michigan, and
Hmm.
all those big programs. And at that point too, I really thought that I was going to go to school for musical
I
theater.
was just going to ask, yeah, was mostly musical theater list?
Well, no, because by the time I got to UNCSA for my senior year, I at that point had realized I had a pretty good idea of where my skill set was
Hmm.
and where I needed to grow, and how to pick a program that would kind of align with what I needed more support in. And so going into that year, I thought I'd be going to a musical theater program. And then by the time it came time to audition for things, I was realizing, no, I think the majority of my focus needs to be on uh, learning how to become the most versatile and well-rounded actor that I
Uh-huh.
possibly can. And then sort of supplementing that training elsewhere if I needed to, taking dance classes in the summer, doing private voice lessons, any
Yep.
of that. I knew that I needed to kind of build my own programming for myself. And
Yep.
so I decided to go for all acting programs when I was going into my
And the
uh,
actual auditions.
yeah
I love it.
audition process, and one musical theater school. Yeah.
What was the one?
It was Texas State because I had really fallen in love with the faculty there when they had taught me at TPAP. So I
Yep.
thought, if there's one musical theater program I'm interested in, I auditioned for them.
I love it. Oh, I want to talk a little bit more about that creation, that self-creation, and how you added some MT into the UNCSA
Mhm.
experience. But I think you are actually, I'm not 100% sure this is true. I didn't check back, but I think you are our first UNCSA artist guest, which is embarrassing because I have a number of friends who went there. It's a fantastic program. We've had them on the pod themselves. But just give me a little from the student perspective. What was the UNCSA experience for you?
Oh God, I mean, it was so formative for me. I went to a really small performing arts school in Greensboro, North Carolina, in my
Hmm.
hometown, and I always knew that there was this conservatory the next town over that accepted high school seniors
Hmm.
for like a really intense sort of conservatory year before
Hmm.
college. And so all 3 years of my, freshman, sophomore, junior year, I had my sights set on going to UNCSA for my senior year. I auditioned and I got in, went there, and it just blew my whole world open.
Hmm.
Kind of on the heels too of going to TPAP for the first time. That was a really, really formative year for me in
Hmm.
my training, and in terms of goal setting and learning new skills. And then also just getting serious about it too, like
Yeah.
really starting to look into my future and think, is this something that I could really pursue?
Yep.
um, and getting so much feedback during that time that was so crucial for me, um, that really laid the groundwork for what the next 4 years would be for me.
Yep.
So yeah, it was really rigorous training. I lived on campus there in the dorms, and I mean, we would start first thing in the morning and go to all of our liberal arts classes, all of our academic classes, and then for
You're,
the
you're
rest of
scoffing
the
at
day, we
calling them
were.
liberal arts. I call them liberal arts. That's fine.
I guess so, but I think of that more as college, and this was
Yeah.
still high school. But I mean,
Yep.
yeah.
Yeah, sure.
So I would wake up and I would go to my biology class and my
Hmm.
Spanish class or whatever, and then I would get to what I was really there for, which was
Hmm.
really intensive training and acting and text work. We had dance classes, we had yoga, we had
Yeah.
voice and speech classes, all sorts of training, well into the night. And then we would have rehearsals and we would do our own shows as well as high schoolers there. So it was really a really good taste of what it would have actually been like to go to a
Yes.
conservatory. And
Yep.
so, getting through that first semester, I was like, you know what, I think this is for me. I think I
Yep.
really want to continue to train in this way.
Yep. And then tell me a little bit about, so at the from especially at the collegiate level, how did you then incorporate some of the musical theater elements? Like, were you finding dance classes to be in? How were you sort of keeping up singing or improving your singing? I don't know if you maybe felt like, hey, already I'm at a place instrument wise where I'm in great shape there, but you're going to now be known as a Broadway icon, as a singer, this is not just an actor. So how did you sort of keep up that training if you did any of that?
Yeah, well, at the time, I don't know how UNCSA's BFA program would identify itself now, but at the time they were kind of calling it a hybrid program. So there was still a lot of musical training. It wasn't as intensive as what you would have gotten,
Yep.
a BFA musical theater school, but we still had dance classes. I was
Yep.
still taking a contemporary class and a jazz class. We had tap classes. You could go outside of the program and take ballet classes through the School of Dance,
Yep.
yeah, if you auditioned into that. And yeah, we had our singing classes. They weren't that rigorous, but I was able to take voice lessons privately with those same teachers off campus in my own
Yep.
time. So I did that for several years. And then in the summers, I would do things like take intensives. I knew that I knew I needed to work on my dancing,
Hmm.
and my singing. So I sought out musical theater intensives during the summers, like the Performing Arts Project.
Yep.
So I was really kind of building this training out, not just expecting one program to be totally comprehensive, but learning how to supplement what I needed from other places as well.
Yep. I love it. And then tell me a little bit about the showcase experience. And I want to get into a little bit of sort of showcasing and then some really early exciting success of sort of how that works. So how did you kind of enter the industry coming out of school?
Yeah, so at the end of the 4 years, we had a showcase in Los Angeles and in New York. We spent really the bulk of our senior year at UNCSA working on this showcase,
Yep.
picking material. And there were a few of us who were musically inclined, and so we got to do a song if we wanted to. And at the time, I remember really trying to think of where is the industry right now? Where do I see myself fitting into it? And how can I
Mm-hmm.
pick material that will align me with the kinds of, works that are being produced right now?
Can you share? Do you remember what you picked? What you did?
Yeah, well, at this time, this was like when Hamilton was
Mm-hmm.
still like roaring on Broadway. This was 2017. So we're like, a year into the phenomenon of Hamilton,
Yep.
and all these other big pop musicals. So I thought, I'm not going to go out there and sing a song from Children of Eden. I'm going to go out and sing a pop song. So I picked a Sia song and I sang that for my
Mm-hmm.
showcase. The scenes that I picked were from television shows, they weren't from plays.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I think I chose a scene from Looking,
Mm-hmm.
to do for my senior showcase. And I forget what my other scene was. But yeah, so I went out there and I did a scene from a TV show and I sang a pop song,
Mm-hmm.
and it did exactly what I wanted it to do. And so, we go out, we perform those, and then we would get calls from either agents or casting directors. I didn't get a huge response in Los Angeles.
Mm-hmm.
Um, our showcase wasn't that well attended in Los Angeles compared to New York,
Mm-hmm.
but I had a few meetings out here. I met with a few agencies and had a few auditions out here as well. And then when we went to New York, it was I had a lot of feedback and options, and so I took a lot of agency meetings and management meetings and went on a lot of auditions and started taping for things. I got signed to an agency through that showcase. And Telsey and Company was also in attendance at our showcase, and they just started like throwing self tapes at me.
Mm-hmm.
This was also like when self taping was like really kind of,
Totally.
ramping up. It was still like so kind of new,
Yeah. What's
it
happening?
wasn't,
What is this? What's a self tape? Yeah.
yeah, especially for a musical too. I was like,
Mm-hmm.
what is this? So I started taping for musicals, and at the same time, I already knew what my first two jobs were going out of college because I
Mm-hmm.
also didn't wait around for showcase. I was thinking, if I don't get an agent out of this, I need to at least have, some kind of, I want to at least be an equity member so I can go
Mm-hmm.
to ECCs and EPAs.
Mm-hmm.
And so during my senior year, I sought out summer stock programs that or summer stock companies that would give you an equity card. And
Mm-hmm.
so I auditioned for Pittsburgh Civic Light Opera because I was like, I want to at least have my equity card if I
Mm-hmm.
don't get an agent. So I had booked the whole summer season there. And then I also got a job with doing a new musical at a theater festival that also gave me equity points.
Yep.
And so when I graduated, I had my whole senior showcase, I had agents, but I also had two jobs lined up,
Yep.
ready to go.
And can you take me through that navigation? Because I mean, this is not necessarily typical for everybody who graduates from a BFA program. Having job lined up, getting agents immediately, having some seems like
Mhm.
pretty quick success rate. It's not a long time before you're going to book once on this island, right?
Yeah, that happened in the middle of all of this.
In the
Yeah.
middle of all of this. So talk to me through like how you navigate that. I mean, it's like it does seem like I'm sure there are more ups and downs and dips for you than what we see from the outside, but it does seem like
Mhm.
in general you're operating from a place of abundance. This is a lot is coming my way. How are you navigating coming out of there and going, okay, these things are happening. What are the right choices for me to make? I'm sure you have agents who are saying, hey, don't do that job. Take this. Hey, keep yourself available for this. You're going to be hot. Like what is that experience at 22, as it's happening to you?
Totally. I mean, I got so lucky, the opportunities were meeting me where I was. I was prepared for them. It was all kind of happening very quickly. Navigating it, I don't know. I mean, coming out of a really rigorous program, I had such a, my, I was so organized already
Mm-hmm.
and had so much kind of like momentum coming out of school, feeling really prepared to take
Mm-hmm.
on whatever came my way. Um, and I really didn't have a whole lot of time to overthink anything. Yeah, it was great to have agents at that time who were able to like help me navigate these choices, but it was all happening so fast. There wasn't really any time to like sit and, there wasn't a whole lot of strategy. It was just like, I'm auditioning for
Yep.
everything and I will take any opportunity. And luckily those opportunities were really high quality and
Yep.
led to other things.
Yep. Do you have a great audition story for booking once on this island? I can't imagine that was all via tape, was it?
It was initially a self tape. So I had when I was in town for my senior showcase, they had me come in and audition for Hamilton,
Uh-huh.
and I went in and I did my sort of initial thing for them, or I'd actually self-taped for them first. Went in when I was there for my senior showcase, and while I was there auditioning for it, the casting director asked me to come back because at that point they were auditioning for people for Once on This Island, but they were really far along in the process from what I
Mm-hmm.
remember. Like they had cast pretty much everyone except for this character, and so they and at the time I was also like in rehearsals. So this must have been a few weeks after the showcase.
Mm-hmm.
So I was in rehearsals in New York for Nikola Tesla Drops the Beat, which was the first like new musical I did coming out of school. So they had me come in and audition for Once on This Island. It was the same casting directors from Hamilton. So, they were like, no, you're not right for Hamilton, but we want to see you for this Once on This
Mm-hmm.
Island thing. And so, yeah, first they had me tape. They had me, get on camera and do like a 16 bar cut of Some Girls or something. And yeah, it was Some Girls in like one of the scenes that I
Mm-hmm.
do from the show. And they were like, great, come on in. Like, we want to, and have you audition in person. And at that point, I didn't know. I'd never been in a situation where like you've made it to the end, like
Mm-hmm.
callbacks kind of thing. It had always been like, okay, it's just you and the casting director.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't know what to expect. And when I went there that day, I walked in and it was like everybody was in the
Yep.
room: the director, the assistant director, the casting directors, the producers. I was like, this is crazy. But let's go. And so, yeah, I did the audition. I only auditioned for them once. There wasn't another callback from that.
Mm-hmm.
I was in that day, left, not thinking much of it. And then a few weeks later, maybe like 2 or 3 weeks, when I was in rehearsals for Newsies at PCLO, uh, we were on like a 10-minute break, and I went over and my phone had been like blowing up with these calls from my agents. And I called them back, and they told me that I had booked it. And they were like, yeah, you're going to Broadway. I was like,
Unbelievable.
I could not believe it. I
The,
still
the least
feel the
believable
shock in
part of
my
that
body.
is the not thinking much of it. You do that, your Broadway audition, you're not thinking much of it, you forget about it. That is not how I remember
Well,
22, 23. I feel like analyzing every second of that audition.
yeah, I was just auditioning so
There's
much
just
at
so
that
much momentum.
time.
Yeah. It's great.
Yeah, that I wasn't expecting, they're telling us when we're in school, they're like, you're going to do 100 auditions and
Yep.
probably not going to hear anything. You just got to keep going. So I wasn't thinking too much about it. I was just like, I'm putting in my 100 auditions. I'm
Yep.
just going, I'm throwing paint at the wall, seeing what sticks. I'm just like, had no expectations of booking anything for years.
Yep.
And
Such a smart
then,
way to think of it. Yep.
yeah.
What about, so you then are going to move on to do some, you also then more Broadway, we do get some Tony and West Side coming up here, but
hmm
what about you now doing a lot of TV and film? Um, any sort of learning differences in terms of that experience of like, first, do you feel like your UNCSA classes really prepped you for that? Did you feel like, hey, now I'm on a film set and I kind of know what I'm doing? Or was there a lot to learn as you go, whoa, this is very different than what I
There was
experienced?
a lot to learn for me. Yeah. Oh man, I remember my first day on set. Nothing could have prepared me for it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, maybe something could have prepared me for it, but that really wasn't what we were training for at UNCSA then. I think at
Yep.
this point they have a lot more emphasis on camera work, but
Yep.
when I was going through there, it was still kind of based on like a repertory system. You're just
Yep.
mostly doing plays and rep and
And even if you bring like a camera into a room, it's not the same as like being on a set. Like it's just such a different
not at
experience
all.
than like here's
Yeah,
a little
and I
camera and one person behind it. Yep.
exactly. Like I had done self tapes. I knew what it felt like to be in front of a camera, but I had no
Yep.
idea what it felt like to be on a set.
Yep.
And I'm coming from theater where you have 6 weeks of rehearsal before anyone ever sees the thing. And
Uh-huh.
here, I show up and we're gonna go through it one time for camera blocking, and then we're gonna call action.
Yep.
And it was the most naked feeling I've ever felt. When I go back and look at that, I cringe so hard. But
Yep.
I mean, I'm like, I had to learn somehow. I had to be really bad so that I could figure it out later. But yeah, that was something I really had to. I mean, that was like a big wake up call for me. I was like, I've got a lot of work to do
And
here to learn
how do
how to
you
work on a set.
how do you think you learned that? Like, so did you then go back and take more classes, or are you learning it from other
Yep.
actors? How are you figuring out the film of it all as you're parlaying into that?
I sought out classes. I was like, I need to learn how to tell stories on camera.
Yeah.
And I know how to do it with my body and my voice on the stage, but I've yet to figure out how to do it on a set. And so I took classes with Bob Krakauer,
Yeah.
learned a lot of the sort of tenets of acting for film, And that was another like moment where I really felt a big leap for myself and my confidence and in my ability. I learned so much from that class,
Yep.
and I took it several times. Um, and then also just learned from being on sets. Like thankfully, I was still booking jobs and having opportunities to go and mess up and get better. And to be honest, I still feel like I'm in that. I'm
Hmm.
still figuring out how to be the best storyteller I can be on camera. It's different. I've put in so many thousands of hours doing it on stage,
Yep.
um, but on a film set, it's just a different animal.
And maybe kind of like in the theater world, there's a different experience of like what it is to be an ensemble, what it is to play a supporting character, play a
Hmm.
lead. Like there's just different experiences that you have to learn. What is it to carry a show, and how's that different?
Hmm.
Like that, each different step of TV and film also has similar shifts and learnings to sort of figure out. And I remember sort of the first experience trying to be like emotional on camera. I was like, it was hard to even be like, when do I do it for real? Like, what it can't be
Yeah.
every time. I don't have it 10 times, but like being like, when does it
I
really?
know.
Okay, this is the real time. Okay, go now. It's just a
Yep.
different.
Learning about like your coverage, like, okay, when do I really need to serve? It's like, okay, so we're doing a wide right now, like save it. Or we're
Yep.
going in closer, like, okay, I'm gonna wait until they're really close to like, just learning how to calibrate your performance based on where the camera is.
Yep.
And things that can't be taught at all, like how to make everyone in the room disappear when they call action.
Uh
Like
huh.
there are so many people on a set and there's no way, no one teaches you how to focus. There is so much going on.
Okay. How did you learn how
um,
to focus? Is that a sports background thing? Is that a like
no idea.
the ball's being
I
hit to me and I
still
know how to do this?
No way. I still don't know how to do it. I mean,
Huh.
I'm still figuring that out. It depends on the set too, right? Because like there are some sets that you walk onto and it's a huge production. There are tons of lighting setups and several cameras. And then there's like the movie that I just finished like a month ago that was more docu style and
Mm-hmm.
it's way more pared down and you barely ever know where the camera is and there's not formal marks to hit. And
Yep.
in those situations, you feel so much more freedom.
Yep.
But the more people there are on set, the higher the budget is, the higher the stakes are, the more expensive the time is, the harder it is to focus in and make everyone on set disappear when it comes time to do your work when they
Yep.
call action. And it's something that I think can only be learned by experience, and I'm still learning that.
I love that answer. That's something that I feel like I'm now like 20 years into teaching this college audition process again and again and again. And I think
Mhm.
sort of seeing like how, especially students who have technique, who have some level of training, how often the issue that gets in the way is, I sort of now put it as like some relationship to their experience of adrenaline. That like it is just
Mhm.
too much adrenaline. That is normally their first couple auditions. That like they just don't yet know like I need some, but not all of it. And how do you have
Yes.
some regulation of like I want to be up, but I don't want to be so up that all my training goes away. It's such
Yes,
a huge part of it.
totally.
Yeah.
Yes. And learning how to use that in different mediums too. Like in theater, that is the wind beneath my wings is that
Yes.
adrenaline. And I know
Yes.
how to channel it when I'm on stage. When you're on set, it's just different. You
Right.
can't you can't ride it in the same way.
There's an
So
athleticism to theater that is not happening when it's all happening in your eyes. It's a completely
exactly.
different. Yeah, so well said. Okay, let's take a short break, and on the back end, we're gonna talk a little bit about the current day and get into some other fun topics. So we're back in a flash. All right, we are back with Isaac Powell. And I promise we talk a little bit about where we are current day. I'm hoping not to do this too painfully, but I would love to just, because I think you're in a moment right now, and you tell me many, many more career moments. I only have a little window into this version of your Gatsby that's going on. But I love it, like, if we can both zoom in and then also kind of zoom out on like what the journey to Broadway is. So like if you can talk a little bit about like, and I go, you don't have to share any secrets of things that are proprietary, but just like what the state of your version of Gatsby is and what that's like from the actor's perspective. I don't know all the specific details. I mean, I have a friend in it as well who's talked about like, I think it's maybe this, and then 2 months later, maybe not, right? But like, I just have this such a vivid experience of like me at 24, 25, sort of understanding what the idea of like a pre-Broadway run is and how
Mhm.
that can mean so many different things for so many different shows. Is it definitely going? Is it maybe going? Is it a 5% chance? So throw that out to you now. Where do you sort of see your state of this show and what the future of it might be?
I don't know. I can't really speak to the specific plans that they have for that production. I only know my end of it, which was, as an actor who was, got to be part of several iterations of it.
Yep.
I I had never been in a position of developing a show. I'd done two revivals on Broadway
Yep.
that were just going straight to Broadway. There was no out of town tryout. There were no workshops or anything like that. This was a totally different beast for me. I'd also never done original material. So at the point in which I entered that production of Gatsby, they had done a couple of workshops, and then they were going to do another workshop, which I was a part of, and then do an out of town tryout, which I'd never done before.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I mean, to me, that seems like the usual kind of trajectory for,
Yep.
especially an original show. You have to take it out of town and do all of that before you can bring it in. So yeah, it was a really unique process for me, just having never worked on something where the writing and the structure was in flux. So it was really, really cool to be part of something that was being kind of tailored around us as
Yep.
performers, and being able to collaborate with the writers and the director in the room in a way that was different than having to take on and interpret material that was already frozen, like
Yep.
West Side Story, Once on this Island. New songs being added, or songs being changed, or songs being cut, or scenes being added, or there was so much going on. So I did a workshop of it. I guess it was over a year ago now. It was like January of 2020. What year are we in right now? I have no idea.
2025 now.
2024.
25
Yeah.
now. Yeah.
And then I knew that I had to go, I knew I would go and do the out of town tryout as
Yep.
well. That was also kind of unique for me, just because I was doing the franchise, which was
Yep.
shooting in the UK. So I missed the entire rehearsal process
Uh-huh.
for Gatsby. I was trying to do double duty in two different countries,
Uh-huh.
which was insane. Do not recommend for anyone
Uh-huh.
ever. So I did the workshop, went away, shot a whole TV series, and then came back in time for tech.
Uh-huh.
And
And
at
somebody
that
else is
point,
playing your part through
someone
this.
else is
Yeah.
playing my part.
Yeah.
Sam, who was so terrific
Yeah.
and took on the brunt of the work for that rehearsal process. So I kind of inherited the track from him
Uh-huh.
and from what
Like
they
you're
did in the
understudying
room.
yourself or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I showed up, and luckily, I knew all of the songs, and some things had moved around, but I just like jumped in during tech, and I
Wow.
think like a week later we had an audience. So I was still finding the show
Uh-huh.
as we're running it. It was really interesting. But it was a really informative process for the creatives as well. That's really what an out of town tryout functions as. It's a chance to workshop things and try
Yep.
stuff out and see what's working on audiences and what's not. And it had also been, what I mean, almost 5 years since I had been on stage at that point. I hadn't
Uh-huh.
been on stage since West Side Story. So it was a really informative experience for me.
Yep. This is such a
And
beautiful, gooey, artistic answer, which I love and exactly what I want you to say on this podcast. But I'm wondering, was there, from the business perspective of things,
mhm.
are you signing a contract that says this is what what my Broadway, sort of rights would be that I'm signing away as you're doing the ART version of it?
I gotta figure out if I'm allowed to say any
Oh,
of
I'm not allowed to
this
say.
stuff. No,
Okay,
I don't think it's that I'm not allowed to. I
yes,
just
you
wonder
are.
like how much I can divulge. But yeah,
Yep.
at the time when I signed on to do the workshop, I at that point also negotiated an agreement for when it would transfer
Right.
to Broadway. So, they presented me with an offer for the workshop, the out of town tryout, and for the Broadway production.
Yep.
So that's kind of how that works. I don't know if it seems that that's pretty typical of most shows
I think
that
not
are.
unlike in TV and film sometimes where at least this used to be the standard of like you're signing on for 7 seasons as you
Mhm,
film the pilot. And you're like,
mhm,
so do I have 7 seasons of this? Which I think for a lot of people, when they're about to make their Broadway debut, I think that can be really like, so this is definitely happening, huh? Even
mhm.
though it doesn't necessarily mean for sure it is.
It doesn't. I mean, sometimes things fall apart out of town.
Yep.
So, I mean, I don't really know at this point what the future holds for the production. I have no doubt it is going to play a very big theater at some
Yes.
point in
Yes.
the near future. But I can't personally speak to where or when
I have no doubt either, and I
happen.
don't know for sure, but I would believe, Isaac, that he also doesn't actually know whether when it's coming, whether it's coming, where it's going. Like that's the thing I think people from the outside, if you're kind of a Broadway fan, you're like, but they all know, like, way in advance. It's like not always. And you may know an intention, you may have an idea, and maybe I'm wrong. Maybe you actually do know a date or something like that. But I think so often people are living in that place of like, oh, the actors must all know. It's like having now lived through this experience, I'm like, no, they really don't until sometimes now it's coming and it's 2 months from now. And are
Yeah.
you still available? Like,
It's funny too because there's so much like speculation and intrigue around this production too. I always see people speculating about what's going on with it, and I love that there's so much you know anticipation around it. But yeah, I don't think anybody actually
yeah.
knows.
It's supposed to be great, by the way. So when you say tryout or succeeded at trying out, it's supposed to be, I've heard fantastic things. I haven't seen it, but I've heard fantastic things
Yeah,
about this. I'm excited to see it, hopefully in some future iteration at some point.
me too.
Just because it made you so uncomfortable in the intro, I want to talk to you about modeling a little bit in terms of, so first, like, how did that come about for you? I mean, obviously, for those not watching the video, Isaac is a very attractive person. So is this something that just comes to you? Is it something you sought out? How did modeling become a hyphen that you're adding to your hyphens?
No, and I would never call myself a model. I've
I've
done
seen photos that
some.
make you seem like a model. I would call you a model. I've seen photos.
How did it come about? When I moved to New York, there were agencies that had reached out, and I signed with one,
It's
and
a
did some
modeling agency
editorial stuff.
specifically.
Yeah,
So,
modeling agency.
mhm.
Yep. So this was aside from my like theatrical TV and film agents, whatever management. This was like its own thing that I was just kind of doing on the side. And yeah, I did like some editorial work, but it wasn't something that I sought out. It wasn't something I ever was aiming for. It was just kind of a happy accident that,
Was there ever an experience of like, is this something I want to do? I mean, I remember
hell
having
no,
such
excuse my
such a.
language.
Oh, you mean you wanted to do it?
No, no, I never wanted to
Oh
do
no,
that.
but that's what I mean. So I was saying, I remember having such a distinct experience going, of course, every theatrical audition, but also every commercial audition, I would just say yes. And I had this experience of like sitting in a room for a Dockers commercial with just like all these other people who were like more attractive than me, and then some that were less attractive than me, but all looked just like
Yep.
me. And I was like, do I want to sell pants? Is that something that I'm like
No,
interested in doing? Like, I never
it's
said yes to
awful.
this. Yeah,
Going to go-sees and doing all that, and
yeah,
it was not for me. I'll do like editorial stuff, and I'll do campaign things, and you know acting requires you, especially if you're publicizing something, you're doing a lot of like editorial work. You're doing photo shoots that are going to, go into magazines or
yeah.
do digital spreads or whatever. So that's part of it. But yeah, that's not really like something that I'm aiming to do. I mean, I love working with brands, um, but I wouldn't consider myself a model. I'm just like an actor that sometimes collaborates with brands or you know.
I, I like it. All right, but before we completely leave the modeling world, you got
Mhm.
to give our listeners maybe some workout tips. I don't. I mean, you say you just came from the gym. I'm
Well,
seeing these. He folds his biceps for those watching the thing, right? But like, I feel like I see pictures of you in your youth, a lithe young man, always in shape. But now
yeah.
you're giving me Hugh Jackman. You're giving me full Marvel superhero in terms of like. I'm only half joking about the workout tips, but like, is there some relationship that you have in terms of like, the way athletes would think to themselves, this is part of my job is to like stay in really good
Mhm.
shape. Like, is there something where you're like, hey, this is part of what I'm selling is I am a attractive leading man and I want to look a certain way. Is that more for yourself personally? I guess, how do you think of your relationship with like your physical fitness and your career?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think it checks off a lot of boxes at once, right? Because like I grew up in a family. I grew up in the gym. My parents owned a gym in my hometown.
Mm-hmm.
So when I would get out of school, I didn't go to after school. I went to the gym. I just
Mm-hmm.
like grew up in that environment. My dad was a professional bodybuilder, and my sister is. So fitness was always something that was in the family.
Uh-huh.
Um, I didn't really start working out myself until like just before my senior year, probably. Um, and yeah, I mean, I always felt it was necessary to take care of my body, but I never had specific um, ambitions around fitness, I guess.
Uh-huh.
Um, I can see how it can help. I knew that there were benefits to being in shape, especially for maybe the kinds of like roles that I tend to get cast in.
Yep.
So that's certainly part of it. But yeah, I think it's just a combination of like the way that I was raised and also, um, yeah, the kinds of roles that I typically go for. And also, I mean, you say there is definitely a difference between the body that I'm in now and the body that I had when I was like in my early 20s. But I think that's just kind of a consequence of me having more time on my hands these days. So I go to the gym a lot more. It's a sort of meditative practice for me as well. So
Yep.
um, yeah, I tend to spend a lot more time
Well,
these
and
days
some
working out.
aging, I think it's not unusual. That's as you
That
age,
too.
you I can add a little more muscle, but
Yeah.
yeah, I guess it's interesting to me because I think, I mean, it's certainly a message I think we've tried to share on this podcast, and certainly from like the college world. It's like
Hmm.
you should be comfortable in whatever body you have, and you should be able to,
Yes.
and like, and I think there's some real dangerous messaging around the idea of like you need to look a certain way or be a certain way.
Hmm.
I'll say I think that messaging kind of gets out there, whether even if we say anybody can be on Broadway or whatever, people
Hmm.
do look at the Broadway bodies and go, there are a lot of, and maybe especially. I've recently had this conversation with someone who was saying this is probably especially true for men. I think this was on the podcast. But they're saying
Hmm.
especially through that, like men and maybe especially gay men and like gay culture.
Hmm.
There's a bodily expectation that is just can be pretty severe in the Broadway world, and that people go,
Yes.
that is a lot of the bodies you see have six packs.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that was definitely part of it too. I mean, I remember doing once on this island, and I'm like, I'm in a white linen shirt that's soaking wet for half of the
Mhm.
show, and it's unbuttoned. Like, I
Mhm.
definitely feel a certain kind of pressure to, yeah,
Yep.
to look good in this shirt.
Yep. I mentioned gay culture. Something that I noticed in prepping this
Yeah.
episode was on Wikipedia. It said you came out at 16. Obviously, it may not have been to the larger world that you came out. So, and also, who knows if I trust
Yeah.
Wikipedia? But I guess I'd love to just hear a little bit of your experience of like the idea of coming out or maybe living publicly from the get-go as a gay
Hmm.
man. We've had a number of older gay men on the pod who talk about really how different the industry was, whether it's Gavin Creel and Andrew Rannells, and most recently Dan
Hmm.
Amboy was talking about it. Like he wasn't comfortable coming out of school. He really was like in the closet, and then it was a big moment for him in his career when he came out. So I guess I just wonder, as someone of a slightly different generation, what was that experience for you in terms of how you considered that idea, if you considered it, if it was an idea that you thought about?
Yeah. Well, certainly when I came out at 16, I think I actually might have been 15. I can't remember. But I wasn't thinking about a career as an
Right.
actor at that point. I mean, it had nothing to do with that. It was just about, that's kind of the way the culture was moving. This was like Lady Gaga, Born This Way came out. There
Hmm.
was like a big push. It gets better,
Yeah.
all of that. So yeah, I just felt at that time, I felt sort of empowered and emboldened to embrace this aspect of myself. And it felt like society was shifting in a way that made allowances for me to live that way. And
And,
so yeah, I came out to my family, and I never had like a formal public coming out to the broader world. I just continued to live my life
not a cake and a
openly.
reveal or anything. But
Yeah,
it seems like also the world has certainly then felt comfortable casting you as Jay Gatsby and as Tony, and in romantic leads where you're playing
yeah,
straight characters.
yeah. Thank God. I mean,
Yeah.
it's yeah. There weren't really like big considerations about entering the industry as a gay man. We were talking about the senior showcase earlier, and then I remember at the time getting pushback from my professors about having chosen two scenes where I played a gay man in my senior showcase. And I was looking at the industry and I'm like, I see plenty of gay roles.
Yep.
So I'm going to do these gay scenes because I think I'm castable in those roles.
Castable, and you were not worried about necessarily being put in a box that meant
I
I could
wasn't
only play gay
worried.
roles. Yeah.
I wasn't worried at that point. And I know that I can play straight characters believably as well. So it didn't feel like it was going to be a handicap for me being
Yep.
out. And yeah, when I graduated and yeah, came into the industry, I was also in a relationship that was quite public at that time too. So there was never really any decision around uh, coming out. Actually, you know what? Now that I'm thinking about it, there was someone when I was doing Once on this Island. This was very early on, and someone who will remain nameless sort of took me aside when I was just arriving in the city and starting that rehearsal process, and said, you should really think about not being out,
Mm-hmm.
because I think it would be a lot better for you in
Mm-hmm.
this industry if people don't know that you're gay.
Mm-hmm.
And it really shook me because I really hadn't thought
Hadn't
about
considered.
it.
Now I'm guessing
Um,
this was an older person.
this was an older person who I was working with. Yeah, and I don't know if this is somebody who had chosen that for themselves, or where this advice came from, but yeah, I really started to doubt myself at that point. Like, am
Mm-hmm.
I doing something? Am I shooting myself in the foot by being out in the industry? But I didn't really have a whole lot of choice at the time. I mean, I was, again, like, in a pretty public relationship at the time,
Yep.
so it's like
Yeah, and I think
the,
those modern day conversations aren't necessarily between being completely out or not. Though I think maybe some people would be like, I'm not necessarily going to bring my partner to this thing, or I'm not going to necessarily
yeah,
live as completely out and authentic as maybe I am, even if I'm not going to lie or whatever, you know.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
But heartening to hear that that was not something that you considered, and that your experience was different than some. I just almost wanted to bring that into the pod because we have a couple different experiences where people said the opposite, and I was
Hmm.
like, oh, I hope that's not true for a 20-some-year-old person today, the way it is for a
Yeah,
45-year-old person. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, I hope so too.
Yeah. Okay. People have been clamoring for a game, and I'm really sorry, Isaac, that
Hmm.
you are going to be stuck playing a game. We've been like put the games to bed, but then people really wanted them back. Dan
No,
Amboyer
let's
listened
play
to
a
an episode
game.
with a game, and he was like, "Where's my game? I really wanted a game." I was like, "Oh, come on!" And then the people started clamoring. So here you are. You're also a former TPAPper. So TPAP,
Hmm.
we love a game at TPAP. It's a TPAP classic. This is a Neil Patrick Stewart classic that we're going to
Aw,
a very
yay.
silly, easy game. I promise it won't be too painful.
Okay.
I think he had a name for it at one point. We're going to call it "What's in a Name," with some allusion to your Tony and West Side here, because
Okay.
it's going to be a
Oh yeah.
name-based game. Okay,
All right.
yeah,
All
Tony.
right.
There we go. So your job here, to win this game, you have to determine which of the three names of we're doing Isaac, Cole, and Powell. Which of
Mm.
these three names do you share with the famous figure that I'm painting for you in this? So I'm going to read a statement as a famous figure, and you got to be like, who do I share a name with it, right?
Okay, this
You
is
don't
good.
you don't necessarily have to say their whole name, but you'll see there's
Okay.
little hints to the other part of their name in there. You'll see. So you're
Okay.
doing, is it an Isaac? Could it be a Cole? Or is it possibly a Powell? You understand? There's a lot of puns in this game. It's very punishing. Okay, here we go. Do you feel ready to play this game, Isaac Cole?
I'm ready.
Here we go. This man is new to none of us, being the inventor of calculus and having a gravitational effect on the scientific field.
I'm gonna guess it's Isaac Newton.
Isaac Newton, that's right. You only had to guess the Isaac part, but you
Oh,
copied new
great.
to none of us. That's
Okay.
perfect. You did great. One
I
for
can put it
one.
in there.
One for
Yeah.
one. You're doing great. Okay.
Thanks.
This singer from the 1930s was a king of jazz and pop, quite naturally.
This would be Cole. Maybe
That is
Nat
correct.
King.
Nat King
Cole.
Cole. You're getting it. You're getting the game.
Yes.
Okay, now they're going to get a little harder. I was giving you a
Uh-huh.
couple ones to warm up a little bit. Yeah?
Okay. All right.
Hazy though my memory may be, I can still recall this famous songwriter, perhaps best known for writing the theme song to Shaft.
Ooh,
Hazy though my memory may be.
hazy. Well, I'm gonna go with Powell.
Oh, it's a good guess. That's a good guess because I did Cole then Newton, but no, I'm too good of a game
Yeah.
constructor. I would never go 1, 2, 3 in a row. It's
Eh.
Isaac Hayes. Isaac Hayes. Hazy though my memory may be. It's
Ah.
easier if you're seeing them, I guess. Okay. This
Okay.
former Secretary of State was a very serious figure. One might say as serious as colon cancer.
Oh, this one's Powell.
That's
This one's
Colin
Colin
Powell. That's right.
Powell.
That's exactly right.
Yes.
Okay, very good. So 3 for 4, a
Yes.
respectable percentage here. We're getting those
Ah.
liberal arts degree classes up that you that you gave up in high school.
Yeah.
Here we go. Uh, this famous composer of standards, known for their witty lyrics, had hits that really carried bags all over Broadway.
This is a Cole. This is a Cole Porter.
Cole Porter. Yeah. This time I didn't give you the name. I gave you the allusion to the name with carrying bags. All right, our last one. You're 4 for 5. You're hitting 80% right now. This is pretty good. This is our chance to
Alright.
get it up to an A. I think we can do it. As I move later in life, I really appreciate this popular science fiction writer more and more. As I move later in life, I really appreciate this popular science fiction writer more and more.
Oh.
It's a tough one.
Oh, it's science fiction. Oh, come on. Is it an Isaac?
It is an Isaac. That's right.
Yes!
Credit.
Yes!
33% chance. It is Isaac Asimov, as I move later in the
Ah, yes.
Okay, you've done fantastically, Isaac. You have
Thank you.
crushed the game. And now, people out there, you understand why we stopped doing these games, because they're very repetitive. So if you really miss these games, you can keep telling me to do them, but they're a lot of work to make up, and I'm trying to move. I was trying to move to a new
Use
version.
ChatGPT.
Use ChatGPT. Just make up a game for Isaac. I love it. Anything else that we've gotta sort of be shilling here? We got franchise. People could be watching this now, or the things that you want to be selling to us in terms of where we can see you next.
Sure. I've got a movie coming out later this year with Charlie XCX and A24 called The Moment.
Hell
It's
yeah,
a
Charlie
comedy,
XCX. Love
really
it.
fun. So be sure to look for that. I think it'll be out later this summer.
Cool.
And then I'm going to pop up in another TV series later this year as well. So be on the lookout for
A
that. Can't
secret
really say
TV
too
series?
much more.
Oh my
Yeah.
gosh.
With some other Broadway faves in this cast. So that'll be fun to look forward to.
I
Yeah.
can't wait. Okay, my very last question before I let you go then is
Mhm.
just if you could give a little advice to a young artist. So let's imagine there's a young artist out there who
Mhm.
wants to be the next Isaac Powell, who's sitting there going, I would love to have that career. I'd love to be a person like this. What would your advice be to that young person who's listening?
I would say don't spend too much time taking in theater on TikTok. As much as you can, try to get into the real world and have those experiences. I think it's really easy to, uh, you know, take in all of this content from I'm using TikTok specifically because I think that's where it's the most prevalent. But I think it's easy to look at those things and take your cues about what it takes to be a good performer from like viral videos,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't think it compares to actually going and seeing performances in person or actually doing your training in front of people. So don't try to fit yourself into the same like vocal type or whatever as like whoever is trending on TikTok at the
Mm-hmm.
time. Maybe just as much as possible, try to insulate yourself from that and just like go perform in the real world, go learn in the real world, and don't get caught up on social media.
Are people actually consuming theater on TikTok? Like, do you mean like songs? Are people seeing whole shows? What does consuming theater on TikTok look like?
There's so many bootlegs on there, which is interesting. I do watch those, but I'm thinking specifically about like kids who are putting videos of themselves online while they're still in training, while they're
Uh-huh.
still developing. I think
Yeah.
that might be kind of dangerous. I think that could really impede your growth and your training if you're exposing yourself in that way
Yes.
online before you're ready.
Right. You're piercing the sort of bubble of your training environment if you're like,
Yeah, and
okay,
you also get too used to performing for your phone in your bedroom, I think,
yeah,
which can also be said for, if you're just doing tons and tons of self-taping,
uh,
seek out opportunities to perform in front of people,
yeah.
and experience what it's like for you as a body and an
Mm,
energy to be out in the world instead of always flattening yourself on a device.
mm. It's so sad. I remember these very conversations at Carnegie Mellon, like the Voice Lab, at some point they started filming at Voice Lab and then putting them up
Mhm.
on YouTube. And it was like, this is great for people's careers. People were like literally booking off of their like sophomore
Yeah,
Voice Labs. But you'd be like, this is bad for Voice Lab. It's bad for the class that like
yeah,
now it's becoming a performance for a phone instead of an experience of learning that's happening with other humans.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
All right. Well, we know we can follow you at Isaac Cole Powell. We know you have a secret TV show you're popping up on. Funny movie with Charlie XCX. Maybe Gatsby at some point in the future, but who knows? And we won't try to guess. Isaac, thanks for coming on the pod today. It was so fun to
Thanks,
get.
Charlie. This is so nice.
Yes, yes, yes. So nice getting to chat with Isaac. He has a really beautiful perspective on the industry that is wise beyond his years, and he is very young. And I'm always happy to get a little bit of youth on the podcast, especially to get perspectives that are closer to what our students' experiences will be. And then, especially even more so, mixing in some of those non MTCA students too. So you're getting a full range of perspectives and not only getting MTCA alumni, even though, of course, you'll get plenty of MTCA alumni, including another one coming up soon. I wrote down like 8 takeaways. So let's jump into them rapid fire style. I really liked the way Isaac talked about UNCSA's high school program being a great testing ground for whether he was ready for a collegiate BFA or not, which he felt like now he was afterward. We talked about that idea a bit in the interlocking episode, and it's also something I often talk about in the context of summer programs, right? You definitely don't need to go to a performing arts high school to be a competitive auditioner within the BFA audition world or a fancy summer program. None of that's a need, but it can offer you a unique perspective on whether you're actually ready for a BFA environment. I will say, for those who have not looked at the schedule of a BFA conservatorial style experience, it is intense, right? We often use the Hogwarts analogy when we're talking about like how little muggle learning there is, means how much of it is magic, right? But it also holds sway pretty well when you talk about the intensity factor. There's a lot of early mornings and late nights with Quidditch practices or whatever it is, and just a lot of artistic classes. So for the right student, that sounds magical, right? That sounds great. Oh, magical. I like that for Harry Potter. But for someone who has had a kind of normal high school experience and just like love doing their musicals and thinks they love acting, it is helpful to get a little bit of that trial run and know, would I be into this if it was a 12 or 14-hour day, right? Just that idea of like 8 a.m. yoga, 9 a.m. acting, maybe a 12 p.m. voice and speech, a 2 p.m. dance class, a 4 p.m. theater history class, and then you have a dinner break and you go right into rehearsals for a show, or maybe it's tech for a show, crew for a show in freshman year. It's a lot, right? Often a summer program can give you a 2-week window, but obviously a performing arts high school gives you even a longer version of that trial run to go, is this really right for me, right? Especially before you spend a lot of money on an expensive year or 2 years of a BFA program, it can be good to know if that's actually what you want to do, or God forbid, 4 years for those of you who end up sticking through the 4 years, even if you decide it's not what you want to do. And this takeaway, I'm sure many of you can anticipate if you listen to a lot of these episodes, which is just talking about the levels of MT classes at an acting program for those who love musical theater. So I thought Isaac put it clearly and really well. And it sounds like UNCSA was a really great fit for what he wanted to ultimately do, which was a combination of theater, musical theater, and then TV and film. And again, as we've talked about, the industry is not going to distinguish firmly between what your degree says: acting, theater, stage and screen, musical theater, whatever, right? If you sing beautifully in a showcase, a Sia song, as Isaac talked about, then you're going to get interest from agents who are looking for musical theater actors, right? But it is just worth noting, as we've talked about in different contexts, that you're always pulling from one area to get another, right? There is no such thing, in my opinion at least, there's no such thing as a perfect program which just has everything you'd ever want or need for all people, right? If one program has more academics, it necessarily has fewer artistic classes, right? If one has a wonderful and diverse intensive acting training like a UNCSA, the MT training might be suffering, right? I mean, I love that Isaac talked about seeking the training he needed to balance out what he felt he wasn't getting. Some additional dance, additional private voice, right? That tends to be true at any program, whether it's additional academics or it's one of those specific artistic disciplines that you want to get to your level. Maybe they offer it, but it's not at the level you want. Because so much of what we're talking about here is level. Every acting program worth its salt is going to have some singing and some dance classes, right? But what level those classes are going to determine how much they're going to help you up your game, if at all, right? I know our actor dance classes at Carnegie Mellon were not the highest level classes. And you can tell that because I didn't fail any of them despite my dance ability, right? We had some people in those classes who were really high level dancers from before, just happened to be going for acting. And of course, they're still able to get something out of the class, but it's not upping their competitive game the way a more appropriately leveled class might, right? Given how much time in that class is spent on the Charlies of the world, right? I'm the one pulling that class down in that case, right? And the same would be true for a singing training for actors, right? You're training to a totally different expectation as a singing actor than you are in an intensive musical theater program. And again, I say this noting we have had multiple Tony Award nominees and Tony Award winners who were trained as non-musical actors on the pod, including people like my buddy Gabe Ebert, who was just nominated again, I think days ago. He was nominated again after he won a Tony for Matilda. It was a Juilliard grad, right? He didn't train intensively in musical theater. If he's a good singer, you can still do really well in this career. But all of that is to say, you've got to seek out the educational path that is best for you. But just do note, if you're an MT or bust kind of person who really likes the competitive level of a program like UNCSA, like Juilliard, right? Maybe you like it especially because you're interested in acting, especially, you are going to be giving up something in those classes, not being a full MTU major the way that you would be at a different school. So just knowing that, right? While we're on school, I really loved hearing about Isaac's showcase response, especially the fact that he didn't have a huge response in LA, where now in LA he works all the time, where he was podcasting from. Shout out to that beautiful West Elm chair in the background for those who watched the video. It's furniture envy the whole podcast. It's the chair I dream of, and having an apartment big enough that I can put that chair in it. But it just goes to show you the showcase response. It just goes to show you, you never know, right? I would have guessed that he would have had a huge response in LA just based on him and his look and his vibe, but instead New York City ate him up, right? And then a few years later, he's all over your TVs back in LA, right? And maybe that leads well into one of my favorite takeaways from the interview, which is just Isaac's general demeanor and attitude and how appropriate it is for this lifestyle as an actor, right? I thought he just had such a good mix. When I was asking him questions about the future or how he thought about things, he clearly was someone who was forward looking and was trying to plan things out. Like you heard him say that he tried to line up work after school in case showcase, didn't go that well. Great, right? But he's also just not someone who obsesses over what's going to happen next. Regular listeners will probably know that I'm definitely not someone who buys into the most woo woo of the sort of actor spiritual life approaches. My wife will sometimes burn some sage or whatever in our apartment. That's about as crazy as it gets for us in this household. But I do think there is a reason some of the more woo woo spiritual ideas do tend to intersect with this particular kind of artistic lifestyle. And maybe not even we have to be woo woo. Sometimes we're talking about just like Buddhist ideas or something like that, the ability to release and detach. It's not necessarily woo woo, depending who you are as a listener, right? It is just a career where you have so little that you can completely control. Whether your show goes to Broadway, which we'll talk about in a little bit, whether that big Hollywood producer decides to go with someone who looks like you or someone who just looks like someone else, right? Whether your pilot gets picked up after you film it and it can completely change your career. It's not that you have no influence over the events in your life, but you just never have any kind of complete control while you're coming from the acting perspective. And I thought Isaac seems like he brings a really cool mix of like that let go and let God energy while still having a clear strategic head on his shoulders. That latter, that strategic head, is probably more important when you're talking about decisions for the day to day. But that former, that ability to sort of take what comes, it's really important for the sustainability in this lifestyle. If you're going to do 30 years in this business, you need to be able to find some version of that for your heart, right? You just have to be okay with the idea that what will be, and bring some of that que sera, sera into the way that you navigate the world, especially in your interactions with other people in the industry. If you're spending all of your time obsessing over what's next and talking about what's next, people are generally going to be like, I don't like hanging out with that person as much. Versus the people who are like, it's cool, it'll be what it'll be. Those tend to be people who just attract other people. And a lot easier said than done. That's why I'm pointing out that I think Isaac does it really well. And I guess that leads me a bit into this takeaway that I jotted down about Gatsby, which, I'm not sure exactly what he could have told you that was particularly interesting in that moment. And I was asking you, like, hey, what do you know about this, right? He gave you this big, I don't know. And I think that's probably all I could have expected, right? He just gave it in kind of more politic terms. But I do think it is a really interesting moment that happens in actors' careers, especially in the musical theater world, since so much of that world is aimed at Broadway. So much of what you can do just gets wrapped up in that vortex of like, what chance does it have to go to Broadway? Will it go to Broadway? When will it go to Broadway? And you get lots of like speculation and rumors, and all that kind of stuff starts to swirl around in the vortex, right? And then so many actors have these like heart-wrenching horror stories of why their production, which was destined, definitely slated to go to Broadway, didn't end up going, even though that's like a really normal story, right? I'm going to make an analogy that will make sense to about 3 listeners out there. But like anybody who's ever played poker before, all you ever hear around a casino or any kind of card room where you're playing poker is story after story about everyone's bad beats. Bad beats means like you got unlucky in their mind, right? They'll be like, can you believe my aces lost to his kings? And I'm always like, yes, I can believe it. That's going to happen like 20% of the time. Out of 5 times, it's going to happen once, right? But whereas with poker, we can see and understand those numbers. That's calculatable. You put your money in, you try to be a favorite, but you understand the edge might only be 60-40 or 65-35, right? Nobody has any sense of those numbers realistically in the Broadway world, right? There definitely are real bad beats. There are those productions that were a 90% chance or even a 99% chance of going to Broadway before a pandemic hits or something goes crazy wrong, or maybe other less obvious tragedies could happen, right? You're going to hear stories of, everything was slated, everything was ready, but then the star actor didn't agree to their contract negotiations and all of a sudden everything fell apart. Even though you did everything you could, you booked the job, it was all going, all this, right? But there's also this really interesting thing that happens where every year there are more productions that are slated, that are intended for Broadway, than there are theaters to house them. So just because something is Broadway bound or is the run is a pre-Broadway trial doesn't necessarily mean that that production is definitely going to go just because the trial went well or because the producers still want to bring it to Broadway, right? And then all the way down the line with that, all the way down the sort of spectrum of that, where there are some productions out there that are pre-Broadway in the same way that I'm like pre-Major League Baseball, right? I do have a chance if those, big scouts come down to the Broadway Show League this Thursday and watch me beat up on George Clooney as we take down Good Night and Good Luck, which we're hopefully going to do if it doesn't get rained out. But I'm going to say it's pretty unlikely that it's going to happen. Even though I am still pre-Major League Baseball, I think it's unlikely that those scouts are going to pull me into the big leagues. And that's just going into all the math of it there, the 99 to 1 or the 1 to 99% chances in terms of the sort of like will it or won't it. That doesn't even go into the level of uncertainty that we talk about when you talk about timing, which can be really crazy. It is not unusual at all for these things to take 7 years, 10 years to make it from a lab to a Broadway production, sometimes with entirely new casts, sometimes with some cast adjustments, or maybe basically the whole cast of the first lab carries through it for the 10 years, depending on the kind of parts they're playing, right? It really, really varies. And so often the actors are the last to know anything. I watched this firsthand with Elizabeth and Jagged, from the pandemic return conversation, which understandably a lot of communication was difficult then in the pandemic with the uncertainty of everything, but to stuff like the closing notice. And then I'm watching it again and again with multiple different productions that have possibilities and the level at which the actors are informed. So often the actors are really in the dark until something is completely official. And how exactly those things become official is a really murky process that I still don't fully understand myself, right? But certainly from an actor's perspective, you don't need to know all these details. It's sometimes almost unhelpful to go too far into these details, talking about, again, that que sera, sera attitude that Isaac have. But I think it is helpful, just advice to have an understanding that when you're in that place of uncertainty, or maybe I should say to have a preparation that when you're in that place of uncertainty, you're not alone, right? It can be really jarring when you're in those kind of interesting coin flip situations where you go, I think it is intended. I don't know what the chance is, right? Maybe there's a 60% chance of this being a career changing Broadway debut for me. But there's also like a 40% chance that it won't go, or they'll choose to recast me because this other star, their show fell out and they want to take this person, right? That is a really hard uncertainty to live with, but it's often just like a big part of what the actor lifestyle is. Okay, we're going to move toward wrapping things up with these takeaways. I did also want to say that I really liked Isaac's idea of how to use adrenaline in different mediums as well. I think that like that's a really smart way of putting it, that the adrenaline really affects the medium, or the medium really affects the amount of adrenaline that you want, right? In the same way, here's a sports analogy we love, in the same way that a ton of adrenaline might be helpful if you need to like tackle a running back in football, but it might make things more difficult if you need to shoot a clutch free throw in the NBA, right? That's really true for acting as well. To dance and sing, a decent amount of adrenaline is really helpful. Though, again, we talked about too much can still make things difficult, even in those sort of athletic activities. But when you're talking about acting on camera, it might require a really different kind of relaxation, right? And given, I think it's worth noting, you'll never be truly and completely relaxed, like at your ease while on camera with 200 people staring at you. There's definitely a bit of training to get to that point where you can achieve relaxation or a form of relaxation while you're still in that adrenalized state. Whether that's some meditation, some breath work, maybe burning some of that sage that I mentioned earlier, whatever it takes from you, but having a process for that, for the ability to get yourself relaxed. Like Isaac's really said, talk about get yourself focused, get yourself in a place where you are in your best mindset to achieve what you need to achieve is really, really helpful. Okay, and let's end with a positive one, shall we? Just to say that I loved Isaac's perspective on type, especially as a gay teen, and how that was so different than some of the people who were maybe 20 to 25 years older than him that we've had in the pod. While, of course, I haven't had that exact life experience of being a gay man, that does seem to track closer to what my own experience of the world is and has been in 2025 compared to some of the stuff that we heard earlier on the podcast. And I'll just say, honestly, sometimes the stuff that feels most outdated in the pod can come a bit more from the professors than from the older artist guests. I mean, some of those artists have obviously had those specific experiences not too long ago in the grand scheme of things. And I think there's a lot of validity to whatever those experiences were, even if I do think the world has subtly shifted in the last 5, 10, 20 years. But I think sometimes professors, when you hear them, they'll like try to teach the way they were taught. They'll teach the information they were taught as if it's true. And it can bring us back almost to another generation. So it's almost sometimes 2 generations old in the information, right? The same way that, like, as new parents, you sort of default to what your parents did if you're not conscious of it. You just find your dad's voice coming out of your mouth or your mom's voice coming out of your mouth because you're like, well, that's what people did when I was 3. And so that's what I'm going to do, right? And then you have to actually stop and think to yourself, wait a second, is that how I want to parent? Does that seem right to me in 2025 that that voice would come out of me? And I think sometimes professors are passing forward lessons that they have learned or lessons they were taught rather than just experiences that they had, right? And that's of course not true of all professors. Everyone's different. And we're talking about over 200 episodes. I'm not saying all professors have always done that, right? But I've just some of the content that I'll hear when it's conversations about type or the way the industry is, I'll be like, that feels like what your professor taught you. And some of that might be almost 50 years old or 60 years old at this point. But again, refreshing to hear some of Isaac's more positive experience. Again, that doesn't mean that all experiences are going to be positive, but it's nice to kind of hear a positive experience on the pod. And I think it does line up a bit more with what I've seen in the world. And if you want to see a bit more of me in this world, you can watch these podcasts on Spotify, YouTube, though I can't imagine why you would possibly want to do that and look at my face while I talk to you, but you have the option. This episode, which is now blessedly ending, was produced by Kelly Prendergast with social work by Jordan Rice. Shout out to our producer, Meghan, who's currently in tech with her middle school show right now as a director. You get it, Meghan. We love you. And if you want to tell us how much you love us, Meghan and all of us, you can leave us a rating and review wherever you listen to podcasts. And you can reach out to us at mailbag@mappingthecollegeaudition.com to tell us why I was right to get rid of the games or why you miss them so. You can also check us out on Instagram at Mapping the College Audition and learn everything you need to know about MTCA, including information on our upcoming workshop tonight at mtca.com. To my young artists out there mapping their journeys, trust that you are enough exactly as you are right now. Now keep striving. We'll catch you next week.